Surprise, next month, the whole winter.
Open public hearing, 6 p.m. And I'm going to turn it over to our city planner, Jacob.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a legislative land use hearing. The subject of the hearing are amendments to the St. Helens zoning and comprehensive plan map. The applicant is Carl Ivanov and Multitech Engineering Services, LLC. Because these proceedings require the observance of certain procedural formalities, the council must take a few minutes to cover preliminary matters and required statements. So, does any council member wish to declare a conflict of interest or bias in this matter? Beautiful. Does anyone in the audience want to object to the ability of a counselor to make a fair decision? Excellent. All right, so the rules of conduct for the hearing are set forth in the handout on the table in the back of the room, but generally the order of proceedings will be required statements, as I'm doing right now, staff report, which I'll be doing very soon, the applicant's presentation, if they so choose, and then those in favor, those opposed, rebuttal, close of the hearing, close of the record, deliberations, and decision. So the following statements are required to be made. The standards for the decision are based on St. Helens Municipal Code 17.20.120, subsection 1, standards for legislative decision. All testimony, arguments, and evidence must be directed towards the applicable standards as listed or other criteria which someone believes applies. So let's talk about what we have going on here. And Kathy, if you could bring up that aerial photo. So for those of you who've been in town for a long time, which I think is all of you, you'll remember the Violet's Villa mobile home park. It's been in town since at least the late 1940s by some things that I found. So some people's lifetimes have started and ended with that being a mobile home park. Of course, it hasn't been there for 8 years in entirety, and when I first started here, it was already starting to wane. But it's been kind of an open space in the middle of town for a long time. It's been owned by the Violet Estate for many years until recently. And we've had a lot of discussions on this property over the years. And the more recent discussions finally turned into action. And that's one of the reasons we are here tonight. So we are looking at getting out our crayons and changing the color on our comprehensive plan and zoning district map. The reason we have to deal with both of those maps is the comprehensive plan map is the first layer or guide, if you will, to determine the zoning. So both of them need to be changed. So Violet's Villa, here's an aerial photo in the middle of town. You have McBride Street to the north, Matson to the west, the Village Inn, formerly known as the Village Inn, now Motel 6 on the south, and of course the highway on the west side. There are some adjacent uses. You have the Bank of the West there in the corner of McBride and the highway, and a couple residential lots that abut it. See, I didn't talk when I was away from the mic. So that's kind of where we're at in the world. If you can go to the next map. So if you see the shaded area, pink is highway commercial, and red is general commercial, and that's what the desire is to go from pink to red, essentially. And the reason they're doing this is to have the ability to build multi-dwelling units, which is just our code's fancy way of saying apartments, because highway commercial doesn't allow that. So that's the zoning map. And if this proposal is approved, the area shaded will be general commercial, not highway commercial. So that's zoning. And note that on all sides, you have R7, which is our moderate residential zoning, though you do have some high density residential, the darker tan to the north. If we go to the next map, which is our comprehensive plan, you'll see that it doesn't look all that much different, but the same thing, highway to general commercial. This is a matter that the Planning Commission considered, and you are actually getting a recommendation of approval this time from the Planning Commission. And that was at a 5-1 vote, so it was a majority decision. So that's something to put in your thinking caps as you think about this project. So I'm not going to, go through every page in this report, but I want to cover some highlights. So in these proceedings, we're supposed to look at the housing goals, or excuse me, the statewide planning goals, and one just of note is housing. So currently the highway commercial zone allows residential development on a limited basis, and it doesn't allow residential use exclusively. It allows dwelling units above uses. So your typical, store on the bottom, residential unit up top. General commercial, though it doesn't allow a lot of options for residential, it does allow apartments. And so there is a potential to increase the multi-dwelling housing stock in town. One of the things that we have to look at is, okay, do we allow this or not? And the purposes of our highway commercial zone, it's pretty self-explanatory. It's your commercial strip along the highway. And if you note that everything on the east side of the highway is not highway commercial, and that's because of those stupid railroad tracks. Mm-hmm. It's a buffer, and so you really don't have highway commercial there. And so one of the things that we have to look at is, are we compromising the intent of the code? And if the applicant was proposing, say, a narrow strip.
You could take that.
Yeah, I guess I could take that,
pull
Mike.
it
Yeah,
out.
I'm just showing off for Kathy. If they were proposing a really narrow strip of highway commercial, then it'd be like, well, I don't know. But they're not. They're retaining quite a bit, and so that's why it was easy for staff and the Planning Commission to be able to support the proposal.
Would you say that's roughly about a third?
Yes, yeah, roughly a third
So the difference between
or 2/3.
highway commercial and general
Two-thirds is the
commercial-
proposed.
Yeah,
Yes.
I'm sorry to talk over.
I'm sorry. The difference between highway commercial and general commercial as far as definition, as far as use?
Uses, they're pretty similar. There's some of the residential stuff that we talked about. Mm-hmm. The other thing, which is kind of an interesting challenge of interpretation, is the highway commercial zone talks about uses catering to motorists, and general commercial says otherwise. And what that means,
Broadens it.
it's always a challenge when you get a use, and well, does it cater to motorists or not? Mm-hmm. But that's essentially the idea behind it. The other thing that we look at is, well, why don't they just propose going to residential, if that's the option? And in fact, one of the one opposition from the Planning Commission was, well, if they want to build apartments, why don't they just change it to a zoning district that allows apartments?
Wondered that. And
the reason is, when we have these kind of proceedings, we have to look at everything, and that includes our employment lands. And employment lands means our industrial and commercial base. And we can check the box that we're not shooting ourselves in the foot in regards to employment lands when we can still see that changing to commercial. And so that was kind of an easy way to say, okay, yeah, we're not impacting our employment lands because general commercial still counts. Traffic. Even though it's been something well established by case law, it's weird, but in zone changes, sometimes you have to have a traffic analysis. And we saw this with the Elk Meadows one. And part of the reason is when you do your transportation planning, you make assumptions on growth based on your zoning, and when you change that later on, it could mess up those assumptions. In this case, they had their traffic engineer give us a report that says that highway commercial actually has a potential greater traffic generation than general commercial. And so this is where it gets kind of weird, because with zoning you have to look at the concept. What's the potential trip generation, not what is the actual proposal. So that becomes a challenge because zoning is so abstract and most people want to focus on the real deal. But in this case, we have to focus on the abstract. The good news is, with regards to traffic, general commercial is a little bit lighter, and so as far as the zone and comprehensive plan change is concerned, traffic isn't an issue. Now, if we were to put that in the paper saying traffic isn't an issue, I'm sure we'd all be, attacked for being negligent. There's going to be a lot of development, a lot of substantial development, and that development will have traffic analyses with them. So just remember, the zone change doesn't apply, but other development will. So it's not like we're ignoring traffic, it's just when it comes into play. The other thing is they are proposing to play with the property lines. This time I'll take the mic. So, see this line here, okay?
Mm-hmm.
This is the current layout. Now, if we go to the next, so this is where that line was. This is a preliminary plat. They do have preliminary plat subdivision approval. They have some things to attain the point where you actually break up the lots. But what we don't want are weird pieces of zoning, split zoning that doesn't make sense. So if this was still highway commercial and this was general commercial, you would have this little notch in there of different zoning on the same parcel. And so this was kind of like one of those things, well, how do we deal with this? How do we deal with this in a way that we don't slow things up? And so my idea, which hasn't rose a stink from the Planning Commission or the applicant, was that, and this was kind of the condition, if you will, that the division between those two designations be per the plan, that plan, more or less, because there's always little changes that can happen, provided the applicant legally move the property line within a year from the effective date of the ordinance. So what that means is this becomes effective, it'll go straight down, but as long as within a year it's changed more or less like that, then the zoning automatically follows it and everything's clean. Because we have the subdivision already in process, I think the odds are pretty good that will happen in a year. We did ask the Planning Commission if they felt like more time was necessary, and they didn't, and the applicant didn't seem to be concerned about needing more time, like, 18 months or 2 years. If you wanted to consider more time, you want to be careful not to add too much time, because that's how things get lost in the cracks. Of course, too little time may not be too friendly to making things happen. So staff and Planning Commission recommend approval with that condition, just because people, the citizens may talk to you. There was some various comments, and I'm sure we'll hear more about those as the property develops. One was traffic in general, but traffic on May Street. There was some concerns about abutting development, because you do have those houses there. The houses there We have buffer requirements that'll help with that. And I've heard a few people talk about crime, and being a good place to hide and ambush. I think this is going to help with the crime issue because you're going to have a lot more activity, a lot more eyes on the street, and as long as it's developed appropriately, I would assume that this is going to relieve some of the issues that have been going on there. Any questions for me?
What was the concern about traffic, more specifically?
Well, the person who specifically mentioned traffic, I think, lives on the corner of May and McBride. And their concern is an increase of traffic on May Street. And May's kind of a little weird street, just because right now there's not much going on here. And so it's not much of a destination. Once it's a destination, you know, you will have vehicle trips coming in from various places. And, you know, this is a classic concern. You have a street like this, which is fairly quiet. Development intensifies in the area, and traffic increases to a certain amount. How much will it increase? We'll have to see what the traffic analyses show us when they come in.
I could see traffic increasing coming from the highway, but I would be surprised if it increased a lot.
Yeah, the assumption is a lot of it will be US 30 and some of the other major roads. Such as Matson, which is a collector street, so it's intended to funnel in other streets.
You'll get a chance. You'll get a chance to share in this hearing. There's a process that will be going through, and you'll have the opportunity to answer those questions.
Yeah, the public has an opportunity to speak. So.
Yep.
So Jacob,
Yep.
are we kind of shooting ourselves in the foot for maybe the opportunity for a bigger box store to come in or something by maybe having a little bit too much area for this?
Maybe. Or maybe not.
Or addressing the need for housing.
And this actually came up with the Planning Commission, so it's a good question. It's still commercial. And we know that the desired use, we don't have an application yet, so we can't say, yes, it will be apartments, although in the public record, their traffic analysis does indicate that's the applicant's intent, and so it's not like we're saying something that isn't broadcast to a certain degree. But it still is commercial in its entirety.
Right.
So if a big box or other larger scale commercial development came to be, it doesn't preclude that. But I would mention, you know, this has been an interesting property for me because essentially my whole career here has been answering questions about this property.
It's been up and down a long time.
And so I usually don't have literally years to think about, well, okay, this is going to go maybe to general commercial, because that's been a concept that's been discussed since at least 2011 or 12, if I remember right. So it's been a while.
Yeah, it's had from a Winco to everything else that's going to be going on.
Yeah, all the rumors and getting people excited. But what I have heard from some of the people that I've discussed is it's along US 30, which gets a lot of cars and a lot of eyeballs. That's a bonus. The downside is it's long and skinny with the narrower side along the highway. And that's been something that's been a little trouble to some of the commercial development aspects. And so it may not be as ideal for that. But if you do have a certain density of people adjacent to commercial uses that help support those, then there could be more of a symbiotic relationship. But to answer your prime question, it doesn't necessarily shoot us in the foot, though it does open the opportunity to use some of that property for non-commercial purpose.
sometimes you just hate breaking up a big piece, you know?
But it really, in effect, makes it more flexible, right? Usage.
It does, it gives it the ability to put in apartments and also, but keep it, commercial that, in 50 years from now, somebody, when they're old and decrepit, they can tear it down and say it's still commercial, we can build a big complex.
That's
there,
correct. Yep.
store there.
The market may change 50 years from now, and apartments may not make sense,
Yep,
and then
and it's
then
still
it turns
zoned.
into commercial.
Yep,
That's always a good point. Is it's a challenge to think beyond our own lifespan, but a city will live much longer than the individual, and so we have to think way out sometimes.
so the way it's zoned right now, or proposed to be zoned, you could actually build, and utilize part of that property still, even if you put half of it in an apartment complex and you had the parking and all that requirements needed, and the other half as a big box store.
Sure. Yeah, they could decide. Well, we're gonna downscale the apartment proposal. We'll only use a portion of the general commercial portion, assuming it's approved, and the other part gets used for another commercial purpose. Yeah.
I see flexibility as an asset.
Any other questions from council for Jacob?
I should note we did have a zone change. When was that? Well, it was years ago, and that was because if you go back in time, there used to be a ribbon of R7, and the estate, to make it more viable on the market, was able to get a zone change of this strip, except for some residential parcels that the estate didn't own, from residential to commercial. And so this time around, we're redesignated some of the commercial parts of it.
I think we've all asked questions that we need to hear. If you want to go ahead with the process.
All right, so that brings us to the applicant's presentation.
Please state your name for the record.
Good evening. My name is Mark Grenz, G-R-E-N-Z. I'm with Multitech Engineering. Our office is at 1155 13th Street Southeast, and we are representing Mr. Ivanoff and his group in this application before you. And I should have objected to the duck hats, but one took them off. So, but Carl is an avid duck fan, so I'm kind of a minority as a beaver, you know. So, but and I should have thought that'd be the case this close to water. There'd be lots of ducks up here. So. But we're pleased to have the opportunity to come before you with this. Mr. Ivanoff's had this property optioned up in some fashion for over 5 years, and he's been trying to put together some form of a development that would work on this site. And he has explored the things that you've talked about, trying to find a big box store to come in to utilize a large portion of the site, take advantage of its frontage on the highway, and then to be able to do something else with the balance of the property, and just hasn't been able to put that type of a development together here. I don't know why that hasn't happened, but as you've noted, you've heard lots of rumors, and there's been lots of different things looked at. So at this point in time, he has some users ready to come in that are interested in taking down the front part, and we're here changing the zone from highway commercial to commercial general because, one, it gives us a few more options. Two, we are looking seriously at putting multifamily in the back because your housing needs analysis, just like everywhere else right now, shows a significant deficiency in housing opportunities, and so it's a good time to do that. You don't really have a site of this size in order to be able to do that type of a development that we were able to locate. So it's a good opportunity. The commercial general zone doesn't preclude other options as we move forward in this, but I think that housing is probably a likely scenario right now. And I think that to the community as a whole, it's not bad because it would provide some buffer from the R7 uses that are around there to the commercial uses out front, and should help make a nice compatible neighborhood for the area. The other thing that's nice about this down zone, changing from highway to commercial general, is that for the neighbors in the neighborhood that are concerned about traffic, the potential uses that come in with that do have a little bit lower traffic generating numbers for that, and then to go even further, if you drop down into residential uses such as multifamily, you have a significant decrease in the amount of traffic that is expected to be generated. So almost half of what you could get on the same site from commercial uses when you go to residential type uses. So it's a significant decrease in that type of impact to the neighborhood. One of the other advantages this site has for you and for the community is that we're located on Matson Street, which is a collector, and this project, as it goes forward, will be making boundary improvements to Matson, McBride, and building a new street down Maplewood down on the south side that will come all the way up far enough to provide access for those front parcels that are still highway commercial to have the ability to access onto Maple to get back to Matson, to get out to Skykes and out to the highway that way as well. So there's lots of good things that we saw on this site for this type of use or the other types of uses that could come along with it. So that's our approach here. We don't have any problem with what staff's trying to do with the boundary, making sure that the zoning matches up with the property boundary. As was indicated, we obtained it at our meeting before the Planning Commission last month. We obtained approval for the subdivision, so we can subdivide the property as it shows in the overhead there for you. That process is well underway. Our plat, our concept plat is at Columbia County, being to the surveyor there, already starting through his checking process. We've submitted a significant amount of our public improvement plans to your Public Works Department for them to start reviewing. Those are things that are tied to the subdivision, so that part of the process is moving forward well, and we hope to have that plat recorded and those public improvements secured and moving forward here in a matter of a couple months. We've talked to ODOT, and in fact, we're working with ODOT in the application for the main access off of Highway 30 that would service this site, and we're not getting opposition to that at this point. So that's moving along well. So everything's coming together on this project for us, and we're hopeful that you'll begin to see some construction activity here. Well, as soon as this comp plan zone change is secured, I think we're going to be ready to start. We're going to actually pull the sanitary sewer permit, start building the sanitary sewer line to service the parcels. So construction activity will begin soon here for you. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have for me. We do expect to beat the Ducks this year. So.
How many apartments do you anticipate putting on there? How many units?
I don't remember. I don't remember exactly.
204?
Yeah.
Is that 2-story or 3-story?
They would be 3-story.
3-story.
Yeah. You must have some other questions.
No, I'm just wondering, the only thing I'm sitting here wondering how much acreage is left for the commercial.
So the property, so there's about 8 acres in the parcel that you see to the back that we're changing to commercial general. And there's about 4.5 acres
Okay.
that we control, that's in the front part there's other parcels
Yeah, I
up
noticed
there
the
that we
bank-
don't control,
the
the
bank
bank.
property.
There's a few R7 properties that are out in front there that we don't control. So if you took the area that's outlined by Highway 30 and McBride and Maple and Matson,
Mhm.
that then we're changing about half of that. And the other part's either going to remain as highway commercial or R7. So that's kind of how that looks.
Yeah, you answered my questions with your presentation. So I had written 3 things down and you answered all those.
You're a Beaver fan?
Yeah.
I appreciate the opportunity to add that to the presentation that I don't usually get.
Maybe in baseball.
Yeah, no, I had concerns about the improvements on Matson Street, just the number of kids that I see walking. I work near there, and so the number of kids I see walking, the idea that there'd be sidewalks and that area is going to be improved is going to be better for all those neighbors and keep those kids safer. And I think that's good. So I think you answered some of a lot
Yeah,
of
and
those
we
questions.
and worked with your Public Works Department, and so Maplewood Street is actually that intersection won't be offset. We got a proposal that they've signed off on to realign Maple as it comes up to Matson there, so that the intersections will line up with each other. So that'll be a good, clean intersection there, and with the curb and sidewalk improvements that we'll be doing, well, essentially all the way around this, it should be pretty good. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you. Jacob, you want to turn on your mic? There you go.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to speak in favor of the application? Does anyone who want to speak who is neutral with regards to the application? Does anybody opposed to the application wish to speak?
Could, could you
you
come
could-
up to the mic and state your name for the record, and we'll try to help you out.
I'm Kathleen Sines. I live on McBride Street,
Okay?
and my concern is when the new bank went in over there, it was supposed to be not the bank, but their corporate office, and it changed. Now I have people that race up and down my street because it goes right down into their driveway. I've been hit almost, I couldn't tell you how many times on the corner there. And now you're going to put in apartment complex, 3 stories. And I don't want 3 stories looking down on my 1-story home. I really don't. I bought the home with green space across my home. And now it's going to be filled up with apartments looking down on my home. I know we need residential. I know that. But there should be some compromise on how many stories is going to go up. You know, I mean, I don't want people looking down in my yard watching me. How many families are going to be watching me? You know, I didn't come live out here for people to watch me in my home. I want my privacy. You know, I want the city to grow, but I still want my privacy. That's why I live 26 miles, 30 miles from my job. I commute to work. I live here. And I want it to grow, but I still want my getaway. It's why I moved here. I've lived here for 3 years. You know, and I really don't want to move. I enjoy it out here. It's peaceful, it's quiet. Once you open up all that green space, you know how noisy my neighborhood's going to be? It's going to be noisy. Right now, I don't even hear US 30 in my yard. I hear the train, but people say it's so quiet. I walk down one block down, and I can hear the traffic. And it's just the hollowness of it. You say you're going to put green space, replace all the trees. You can't replace them. There's going to be no green space. How many trees did you guys say need to be replaced if they tear down all of them? How many?
There's probably a code for landscaping.
Yeah, that was a discussion we had with the subdivision, and it was several hundred. It was
Wasn't
so
it
massive. There's a
like
lot of trees on
9?
the property.
Probably, wasn't it close to 1,000 or more? Because there's a lot of trees on there. And I
So-
know that when my house was built, they had to put trees on. When the house next to me was just built, they had to replace trees that they cut down.
So you understand that it's already zoned highway commercial, and there could
Hi-
be building on it the way it is, right?
Yeah.
It could be a big commercial building,
At least I wouldn't have people
Costco.
looking down on me. Yes, I knew it was commercial. I knew
So-
that
and-
the mobile home was there and
And
that it was commercial.
that the traffic would be more if something like that were put in than it will be this way?
I don't see anything big coming here because the city doesn't really offer them much, is what I've seen. More in Scappoose, they're willing to go there than here. Over the years, I've watched the last 3 years, and I've seen more businesses go up in Scappoose because of
And
them.
we're actually trying to change that right now in our city administration.
I mean,
the
this
new
is what
mayor,
I've seen
Scholl,
in 3 years.
and we are actually
Okay.
trying to change that. And if we were to not follow our own code and listen to everybody that didn't want change,
I'm not saying I don't
didn't
want
want
it.
change. Now by code, our code says 35 feet. Am I correct, Jacob?
35 feet of what?
Any building can be 35 feet. is that
It
correct?
varies depending on zoning district.
Okay.
But for the apartments, it would be 35,
But I mean, the this
if
is
I remember correctly.
But a lot of our zones are a 35 foot.
Yeah, or our residential zones
Yes.
are, yes.
Yes.
Yep. Mhm.
That's what I thought.
Yep.
which is
2-story.
No, it could be 35 feet.
Well, I mean,
It could
a
be
house has a peak
if
too.
you dug
Come
if you
on.
dug a half of a basement. If you dug half a basement into the ground, 35 feet. It's however you want to have it engineered. I'm not an engineer, but
Either am I,
yeah,
and I'm not used to this either.
yeah. So
I just know
We-
that
we-
I came out here because
did
I
you,
grew up in Linton. Okay,
right.
this is the area I grew up in. You know, pretty much. You don't grow up in Linton and not come out.
So you kind of said it
I'm
yourself.
sorry.
You kind of said it yourself. Is that Scappoose is growing and it actually is coming this way.
Yeah,
That's why these guys are
But
here
they're-
because they are part of that.
yeah.
They are part of that growth. It's
But
inevitable.
I don't see a lot of 3-story apartments going in there in a back in the residential area. You know, I really don't see that. And where's the traffic going to go for these 204 apartments?
There will be lots of studies and engineers at the
I
state
mean,
level
because
and
I can
at
tell you,
city level and
since the new bank went
Planners.
open, I have
Um,
so many people,
Just
so many cars going
for
down there.
constructive, I mean, I understand I drive that distance a lot. I work in different group homes in the neighborhood and I see the traffic increasing. But, do you want to just go on the record that you would like to take the neighbors in context and design? Because right now we're just doing zoning. We're not approving anything to do with how many apartments, how tall the apartments. That's not what we're talking about.
Right.
And so that's a whole different process. But if you want to go on the
I ho-
record as, please consider the neighbors and the impact on the neighbors. And you could just go on the recorded and just say that's your statement is please consider the surrounding neighborhood.
Well, yeah.
Because they can do that and allow people to move here and allow people to live here without making it unpleasant for the neighborhood, because who would want to live in an apartment that isn't a pleasant neighborhood? We want it to be an improvement for everybody.
Well, and plus, it's not just children in Mansing. We have handicapped people that live on that street.
I work with them.
You know, I
know.
see them all
Yeah.
the time. I've helped one that couldn't get back, couldn't walk.
Yeah, we appreciate your
care-
input.
Caregiver was in my car with me because
Yeah.
he had to be with them, but he couldn't walk anymore. I mean, it was 2 blocks, but I still gave them a ride.
Yeah. Well, your input's appreciated on the record, and it
Okay.
becomes part of the process.
Yes, as part of the neighborhood, I would like to know what the impact, you know, be low, you know, not a lot, because a lot of the people are just moving in there,
Oh,
Right.
So
you know, and we're used to that green space. And I understand that it can be commercial in
it
a
is
big
commercial
building.
right now. It is.
In a
yeah.
big,
We're just
I
doing a different.
understand it is. That's
different
what I
zoning.
said.
Yeah.
And a big building could go in there. But I don't know. I just know that it needs the neighborhood's concerns involved.
It's your home and you're concerned. And
Very
that's
much.
totally
I just don't-
valued point.
I don't want people watching, you know, looking down at me.
Well, thank you
know,
for,
and 3 stories up to my one, you know, a lot of people, especially if there's 5 different complexes going down, you know, rows. I mean, I know we need apartments. That's what it mainly is over there in that area.
And listen,
And I'm not sure why some of the apartments can't go down past Walmart. There's a lot of open land down there.
there may be someday. Yeah.
You know, I mean, homes over here would be better than apartments, in my view, because there's already homes there.
So I hope that you heard, and I was shocked at it too, though.
No, I couldn't hear the second
Okay.
guy because the mic
So,
was not on.
so the studies show that actually there's less traffic with apartments than with
I
a
don't
big.
see how.
Okay, but I just listen to the
Yeah, I
professionals.
understand that, but I
and
don't
they-
see how.
They
when
put out little
there's-
rubber mats, so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, when that bank went in, a lot of traffic went in because you guys let them change it from being their corporate office to the bank, and now we get all the traffic, and it wasn't zoned for that, for the bank. It was zoned for the corporate office. So I'm scared. I'm scared of this board because of that. Because you let things like that happen. And it's right in my neighborhood. And I seen it. I don't see any of my neighbors here that I care.
thank you.
I get up at 4:30 in the morning, so being here is hard. So, but I care about my neighborhood, and I know that a couple of my neighbors was at the last one, but it was hard for them too, because we don't know what to do here. Most of us have never been in a place like this.
Yep.
You know, but my heart is in the city. I wouldn't live here otherwise. But we still need our neighborhoods, our close-knit neighborhoods, and with apartments, you don't get that. You don't get that neighborhood.
Okay,
feel.
we understand and thank you very much.
Thank you.
Rebuttal if the applicant chooses.
Well, I always do. We pay, so we get to be last. But I appreciate that what she had to say and also your perspectives on it. So with the multifamily project, if we come back in that way, there's another public process for them to participate in, and there'll be an opportunity, and there'll be a lot more detail provided about what they'll be seeing about that. So that's the time when a lot of her concerns will be addressed, and there'll be a lot of detailed information that's provided so she can see what that is. There's a pretty good offset. You know, there's 50-foot right-of-way there. We're dedicating some additional right-of-way. There's a pretty good setback off of McBride to the buildings. And so by the time, and you factor in that where we are relative to the residents around there, there's really not very much intrusion. But we'll deal with that at that time. Just so that there's not, on the record, so there's not any misconception about what I said about traffic. So
Okay.
our traffic consultant said that under highway commercial uses for this site, this property could generate an average daily trip count of 20,968 vehicles. Under the CG, your commercial general zone, assuming that it was all in a commercial use, this site could generate 13,135 trips. If we were to go in and put the maximum number of apartments we could on the site, along with the other uses that would go in the remaining highway commercial, his estimate is that we would generate 6,974 trips. So there's a big swing between highway commercial and commercial general, almost half, not quite half. And then from that, if we were to go residential for the back part there, that there's a significant decrease. I think that the neighborhood and the surrounding areas benefit from the direction we're headed, assuming that's where we end up in terms of the traffic concerns stuff. So I just wanted to be sure that that's the numbers. They're in your packet too, but I just wanted to be sure that everybody understood that I wasn't just guessing. They're
Yeah.
really there. So with that, if there's any other questions you have of me, I'd be happy to try to answer them. Thank you very much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Okay, so we do not have a city attorney present, so you can conclude the public hearing and you'll deliberate at your regular session.
Okay. We'll close this public hearing.